Yeah, the as far as the topic at hand that is going to be discussed, it's really going to be centering cybersecurity, digital clones, and privacy as it pertains to AI. And specifically, I wanted to invite you over to discuss some of these things, not only as a fellow writer, but also as you've previously briefly mentioned as a mother yourself. I'm sure you may have some thoughts about that, especially, parenting in the digital age definitely can
Hmm.
be a handful. So, yeah,
Yeah,
proceed to give us a rundown of, an intro about what platforms you use, who you are, what you do, and we'll go from there.
sure. Yeah. So with my Substack newsletter, it's called Unpacking, and I write about all kinds of things. I say it's about the human experience, but it's really about my experience and how I feel like obviously many of my experiences are relatable to a lot of people. I'm 40, so I'm kind of in that midlife sector, and I'm also a mother. And I have a podcast called Real Motherfuckers, and it's basically about the many realities of motherhood. And I think that this topic is super interesting because I quit social media a few years ago just for mental sanity. And I also was super aware that I became aware that I was posting a lot of photos and videos of my kids. And in my past life, I was in tech PR. And, you know, part of my job is just reading about technology and what it's, the ever changing landscape and all of that. And obviously, security has to do with that. I had some security clients as well. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like I'm posting these pictures of my kids and I'm aware of the implications, yet I'm just kind of like blindly turning away from it. And so I decided, like, in addition to me being aware of that, and I just didn't feel good about myself when I was on social media, I just quit. And now that I've become a writer and started to just share content that I want to consume and I want to share with the world, I kind of felt like I had to be back on platforms. So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and that's basically it. I'm on LinkedIn as well. But, Instagram is just like this huge beast anyway. I felt like I can't consume more. I feel like my mental capacity is not, I, it's just too much. So, um, as far as the other platforms go, obviously I'm on Substack, which is another platform that I think is evolving as well and seems like a social media platform, but for longer lengths of content.
Yeah, it's been interesting to explore these avenues in terms of what they have to offer. Substack in particular appealed to me specifically because I'm someone who I like to keep things as noise free and as simple as possible. And I really think that Substack has a healthy middle ground between a publishing platform and a social media platform. I'm just hoping that the people in charge are not trying to overdo it because there's only so much that people can take before things get out of hand. But as far as the topic du jour, a lot of the things I'm about to throw at you will reference a article actually I published technically today, but I'm hoping you had a look over and perhaps you could give me some insights as far as what jumped out at you off the bat in terms of what you learned from there.
Well, you wrote this at an interesting time because I've also just been deciding on my own if I want to quit Instagram or take a long break from it. And reading your article just kind of validated that even more. But then again, it's a double-edged sword because even if I'm off Instagram, I'm still putting content out there. My content's on Substack. My content will be on a video podcast, which is on all the podcast platforms. So the ability for someone to take my digital image and mark it up as their own and alter it is pretty scary. And I saw the video that you posted also on Instagram of, I don't remember what her name was, but her image was altered, her video was altered, and I think they rubbed off the watermark too to make it just seem more real. It's almost like it makes me want to leave and not be online ever, but at the same time, I feel like it's unavoidable. And it makes me a little bit more cautious about the content that I put out there.
Yeah, so for context, I'm from that era that most commonly people would refer to as the 90s, right? So that would be the emergence of the internet, that would be the emergence of personal computing and cell phones. And a lot of the sanitary habits, for lack of a better term, I've acquired during that time really were associated with common sense for the most part, in terms of, hey, you wouldn't want to be giving your number out to some randos. And I think that carried over very much so on the social media side, as more and more of these applications took over and became not only the norm, but in some cases even a prerequisite. As a writer, one of the things I've noticed is that for people to take the work we do seriously, there's an element of social currency involved in terms of how many followers you have, or even who has posted about you. And it's been an interesting process to unpack all that, pun totally intended. But it's a lot of the issues that I'm personally dealing with in terms of having both to balance an output of creativity and putting things out there, but at the same time keeping to myself, because I very much am not looking to entertain a parasocial relationship with strangers on the internet, especially from the standpoint of, having people know more about you than you know about them. I think that's not a very healthy ground to be on. But as far as you're concerned, from your outlook from that era, from how things have been to how things are now, what's your current take on things?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I was born in 83, so around the similar era. It's interesting because I have a teenage nephew who lives with us, and when I talk to him about these types of things, it's almost like I don't want to say so what, but it doesn't faze him when I talk about like how things online are not what they appear and things are altered, and that's just the way it is. That's how we grew up. And I think that's the other thing too, is that I want to teach my kids is like how to be human in real human life, and teach them as much as I can before they can go onto digital life, so that they know how to truly interact and be cautious about protecting themselves and also being respectful to others online too. It's almost like I want to teach them to be socially aware and mature enough before they even go anywhere digitally. Because it's such a false notion of communication and being human with each other. It's when it's very one-sided. And then the reaction of the other person that you're, quote, person that you're interacting with online isn't going to be able to react immediately. You don't see their face. It's such an abstract form of being human. I feel like it's such a hard thing to navigate.
Yeah, and as far as your personal relationship with technology and the sorts of devices that you've grown accustomed to or you've used, could you describe some of them? whether it's, a Walkman or an iPhone and so on?
Yeah. I have an iPhone, I have a laptop, and, um, in my house, we try to be low media. My kids go to a type of school which basically promotes no screens or no media at home, or very low media at home. So I try to model that and not have much more than that. I mean, we just bought an iPad because my daughter takes virtual piano lessons. But yeah, as far as technology goes, I mean, like, I'm not on TikTok either. Like, I feel like I'm not on a lot of like the platforms a large, massive media is on, because it's a lot of mind clutter, in my opinion.
That's quite the way to put it, mind clutter. I feel that the content available online, the large majority of it for sure is trash. But I think it's trash because it's a reflection of people being people, not so much of the nature of the technology itself.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you step out in the real world, if you toss a stone out there, chances are you'll hit someone who can act in unscrupulous ways, whether it's purposely trying to cut you off during traffic, or even someone just being a jerk to you at the store, So there's no shortage of bad behavior in the real world. And unfortunately, that does carry over on the internet, especially from the cyberbullying side and so many other issues that pertains to body image and things like that I think really is affecting the mental health of a lot of teenagers that perhaps don't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think I have an advantage, because I happen to know a world that was not like this, and I have a frame of reference that can remind me and keep me grounded in terms of, hey, this is not normal, so I'm going to ignore that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was just making this observation about body image when I was thinking about growing up. The media that I consumed was TV, which was the choices were not very much. I didn't even grow up with cable. And then there was magazines at the grocery store, and just those alone were enough to be toxic for me as a girl. And now just the idea of like those images and being just so readily available, and so much of it, is a very scary way to think about like how our minds are shaped and how we're influenced now, because there's so much choice.
Have you by chance heard of this study where they've talked about the amount of people that at any given time someone can realistically keep track of in their heads?
I have, but do you have the statistic?
The ratio is somewhere in the neighborhood of 170. So that would be the population of a small village. So think of the early days of humanity, if you want to call it that, where for all intents and purposes we lived in huts and caves and stuff. Yeah, for the most part, the population there would rarely exceed the thousands. So what would happen is that you don't know that many people. So the frame of reference in terms of how much you have to keep track of is way lower, considerably so, compared to what we're exposed to on a regular basis here in the modern times. And even recently, I was seeing news of a fire happening in Hawaii, and although the news is distressing, I have no other reaction besides, well, that happened, because I'm so far removed from it all. And I think that's part of the downsides of technology in terms of the increasing interconnectedness that it enables. It correlates to an inability for people to keep track of things that might be important to them, which to that point, a lot of the peers I have in my industry they have a very common phrase that they like to say, which is, "Oh, sorry, I didn't read your text." And usually it would be to the tune of whether they're watching something on some website or they're interacting with someone else on some other platform or whatever other distraction that might be happening on their device. And it's causing friction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think stuff like that doesn't really help, especially in the landscape for social media that is so polarizing by its nature. Because at the end of the day, what these platforms care about is engagement, and they don't really care how they get it. But yeah, that study that I referenced, really gave me a very interesting shift in terms of, oh, okay, so I'm not weird for not wanting to know what the Kardashians are up to, or that many other things. Because every so often I'll have a moment where it's that "do you feel old yet" kind of meme, where it's like someone will tell you about something expecting you to know about it, and you'll just stare at them wide-eyed like, actually,
Right.
not know. So please enlighten me. So yeah, there's only so much I can keep track of. And even for me, I'm a bit of an outlier. I can definitely go above the means when necessary by virtue of the industry I'm in. But even then, like, I'm not going to try and memorize thousands and thousands of faces and places and websites. That's unrealistic.
Yeah, I I remember when I was off social media for a few years and I would see someone and I haven't seen you in so long. How are you? And they're like, "Oh, you saw on Instagram that I was here and there." Like, you know what? I actually don't know because I wasn't on there, and tell me now because I would love to hear that from you. And I remember feeling this like pause between the two of us where they're like, "Oh shit, you didn't see? Like, you don't remember? You weren't able to consume the content that I was hoping that you would click on the internet." And I think it was an interesting shift in our conversation where like, okay, like, yeah, we have to actually kind of have this real face-to-face human interaction. Let's practice it rather than have it as a social exchange on the internet.
There's a weird expectation that, I'd say, younger crowds put not only on themselves but on one another in terms of what is required to ingest on a day-to-day basis, and that very much tracks. I know people who will legit tell me that, "Hey, how come you didn't like my post or comment
Yeah.
on my stuff?" And that's something I'm willing to gloss over because it's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. But it is very interesting that the attachment to that digital clone, if you want to call it that, which would be your social profile.
Yeah.
There's a real attachment there where people are as invested into what's happening on that front as they are at what's happening on the offline front. And I think it's concerning. And
It's almost like I feel like people want the validation online more than any other way. It's like if it didn't happen there, then it might as well have not had happened.
yeah, that's exactly right. There's a quote, if I'm trying to recall, it would be from a public speaker. I believe it's John Watts or something. He was talking about this idea of what photography as an art form has done to the human psyche, because it used to be that before photography became a thing, uh, people would just enjoy events as they were in real time. And then as soon as photography became a thing, it changed the newspaper industry entirely so that people would now live vicariously through whatever it is that happened at that time through these pictures. Um, and it was a very interesting observation that has been made. I don't know when that quote was said specifically, but The fact of the matter is that human beings seem to have an inclination towards consuming things that happened in the past for whatever reason.
That's true.
But yeah, I also wanted to get another thought from you as far as what you've read. You did signal that you're concerned about your digital footprint and that it gave you some better sense of clarity in terms of what decisions you should be taking. But as far as these new emerging technologies are concerned, such as AI, what is your current expectations or thoughts on the matter?
I've had some conversations with friends just casually about AI and what it's doing to our society as a whole, as well as like with the writing world as well. And I don't know where I stand with it. I feel like there's nothing we can do to stop it. Although my initial instinct is to say I'd love it to stop. But at the same time, I know there will be some good and there will be some bad that comes out of it. As far as what I put out there, I think I'm just going to keep on course, stay with what I instinctually know, especially as someone who has lived, like we talked about earlier, is like I've lived half my life not on digital. And so I know, and I, as an adult, without digital. And I think that's helped me with making good decisions on what I put online. Sometimes we slip up and put too much, but it's a little hard because the podcast that I created with my friend, we talk about motherhood. I mean, one thing that we talked about, we kind of talked about our values and what we plan on doing to protect ourselves and our families is we are willing to talk about our own personal experiences, but I am not willing to talk about what my husband was doing or like specifically what my kids were doing. And I don't want to talk about like if they did something not great and it come back to haunt them later. I really want to focus on what I'm experiencing as a mother. And then also, we're expanding too, talking to other mothers as well about their own experiences. But I think that I want to continue my value system of just trying to make sure that my kids are out of the picture, even though that's kind of hard because I am talking about motherhood and I'm a mother because of my kids. Yeah, it's interesting because my husband was kind of surprised when I decided to start this podcast. He's like, yeah, you were so focused on not putting anything of yourself online. And, I was in a career before where I could stay behind the scenes because I was in PR, but I was helping get my clients' messages out to the media and to the wider public. I relished in being behind the scenes, so it was a different muscle, a different kind of choice for me to put my own story out there, which I do enjoy. I do feel like there is some positive outcome from this where, I've heard from a bunch of moms who feel like, shit, you've made me feel seen, and that's why I wanted to do it.
Yeah. And one of the things I also wanted to bring to your attention that I did not put in the article itself, because I believe that one would be a bit of a spoiler, but I really think in on the front of privacy and being mindful of what's being posted, TikTok as a platform, since it is not a platform you're that familiar with, I think that would be up to me right now to perhaps ruin it for you in terms of what's on there. I'm about to send you a link actually,
Okay.
which I technically can't right now because you don't follow me on this app, but try and follow me real quick so I can show you the message.
Follow back. Got it.
Okay, so this would be what's called a TikTok sound. And the whole idea behind it is that the way TikTok works is that it aggregates different types of content based on the sound that is used on there. So memes and trends is usually how stuff like that emerge that the marketing companies can then take advantage of in terms of, targeting people and stuff like that. But the Sound Asset Show in particular features a type of content that I wanted to get your take on as a mother yourself.
How do I get to it?
You just click on it. It should take you to that page and just like show you some stuff.
Okay. I can't find it.
In your messages, you mean? Or
Let's see. Okay, there's sent you a link. Got it. Okay.
yeah, just tap on it and just give a description of what it is you're seeing as you're scrolling on through.
Okay. This. Oh, it's telling me to get TikTok. One sec.
Does it not show a website page at all, or does it just say download TikTok right away?
Let me see.
Because on my end, it just shows me flat.
It says Sonito Original, and then it shows me a bunch of women breastfeeding.
Okay, so it does show it as it's supposed to. Yeah. So
yeah,
that would be it. And you probably won't be able to see the comments on these videos, but let's just say that they're not very tasteful, to say the least.
Right.
And that's the kind of stuff I wanted to get your take on in an era where, as you've seen with the previous video I posted, a teenager had photos of themselves manipulated with AI and turned into something it was not intended to be. And I think having that sort of content out there for mothers in particular can be upon a concern. But then again, I'm not a mother, so maybe you can enlighten me.
Yeah, I mean, there's several levels to this where I'm thinking about first my kids, and I do have this fear that one day they will be teenagers, which they inevitably will be, and post something of themselves that could be commented in a negative way, even though it's probably nothing wrong with the photo. But, there's people out there who want to say things, whatever those keyboard warriors is what you would call them, right? They're out there to just say crappy things about people online. And I think that it's such a interesting thing that we're such a society to just mindlessly post stuff about ourselves that we don't think about the negative results from it, especially with this as far as it being actual mothers doing this, mothers posting themselves. I feel like, gosh, this is such a interesting one because breastfeeding is so natural. It is a beautiful thing, but when it's posted online, it's just open for any kind of commentary. And I think that's scary. And I'd rather personally not post anything that would be, wait, are you there? I heard a click or like a sound. Okay. Yeah. So I feel like it's a scary thing to post content of yourself. And it, this conversation is actually making me a little bit wary of just, gosh, like thinking back and all scrolling in my head, all the stuff that I've posted online and, like how much more do I have to be mindful and thoughtful of the stuff that's out there?
Yeah, I would say that in that arena, I have a bit of an unfair advantage because, as I've described earlier, I came up in an era where I think I got the teenage antics out of my system way before mainstream access was even a thing. And then there are peers, in my circle who do nothing but post stuff online. And
Mhm.
And as a matter of fact, one of them is here right now, and I was curious to hear some of their takes on that matter too, since they're here on the panel.
What do you say?
That would be Asa over there. Hey, Asa, you're muted. Oh, well, I guess they're troubleshooting something.
That's all good.
Yeah, it happens. But yeah, it's a lot of the things I've noticed personally on the content front. I've seen a very clear difference between how heavily content is pushed when it is a female person posting it versus a male person posting it. And even then, I think there's a certain degree of attractiveness meter, if you want to call it that,
Mm-hmm.
that social media clearly is trying to gauge you on. And yeah, it'll definitely push you more if you're someone who's conventionally attractive. And that's something I've noticed a bunch as someone who's done photography as a professional ladder work. And what specifically stood out to me is how people would interact with my social media channels, whatever I would post, because the comments were fine for the most part. It's the private messages that really started to enlighten me in terms of, oh, so that's what it's like on the other side.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, so one of them that really stood out to me to this day was this guy who I actually do not know whatsoever, but I'm assuming whoever it is that they commented on, they knew. And for whatever reason, they seem to think that this person's account was their account and not mine because their photo was on there that I took with as a professional photographer. So they then sent that photo to my inbox and proceeded to flirt with, well, I guess like what they assumed to be them, but actually they're flirting with me. So for the sake of, I guess, just seeing where this would go, I just entertained it for a little bit. And then he then proceeded to talk about how he wanted to have intercourse with me and how he wanted to have me over at his place and have a drink and stuff like that. He got pretty explicit fairly quickly, and it was interesting to see how easy it was for him to just put it all on display just like that with no self-restraint, if you want to call it that.
Right.
And by the end of it, I just replied by saying, you do know that everything you say can be posted publicly, right?
Right.
And that was the oh shit moment for him, that he started to freak out saying, don't post any of this, blah, blah, blah. But I posted them anyway, as to show people, hey, this is how you talk to people in private. So especially to people of the opposite sex, it's I personally don't think it's one thing to be flirting with people that you know. I'm not gonna be the authority on that, but it's another altogether to do so with a complete stranger, which in this case was, like, I do not know this person. So it was very interesting to see that this is what people get up to, and it really gave me a different perspective of the dick pic epidemic that I've heard about. Because up to that point, I really, really asked myself, do people actually do that?
Yeah, I know. I asked myself that as well. And sometimes I wonder, with younger generations that have grown up with digital and social media since youth, is if they really understand the difference between a relationship in which you met someone online and a relationship in which you know someone in person. And I sometimes think that those two have been blurred. Like, there's this idea that, we've been talking online for a while, like we must know each other, but you don't. I just think about in the 90s when I was on, AIM or Instant Messenger, like we would go into these chat rooms, and I remember like as a kid with my brain not fully formed, like thinking like I'm talking to someone that's real, and like just believing that they're exactly who they said they were, and they were unlikely not that person, so
Yeah, and to briefly circle back to that Alan Watts quote I was talking about, he specifically was talking about the idea of overthinking and what that does to someone. And again, I don't know what exactly this was said, but in that specific passage, he quotes, uh, states that most of us would have rather money than tangible wealth, and a great occasion is somehow spoiled for us unless photographed. And to read about it the next day in the newspaper is oddly more fun for us than the original event. So,
right.
and also I forgot to include that last one. He says that this is a disaster. So clearly this is someone who's not very optimistic about technology and what that does to people.
Yeah.
And I would not really say that I'm pessimistic myself. I'm just someone who's really observant of
Right.
habits and behavior from consumers of that technology. Because for me, like I come at this with a very analytical brain. I don't do things for the benefit of a platform. I do things so that it serves me ultimately, because I know what they want. And that's why I think a platform like Substack, for example, is gonna be interesting to see how they pivot as they scale, or if they scale, because one of the problems that usually arise when a platform or application gets big is that there's more hands in the pie, right? Direct byproduct is going to be more oversight in terms of how things are ran. And to my knowledge, Substack currently is a fairly close-knit circle of people that are involved. And if they do get to a level where it's, say, like Instagram with over 2 billion active daily users, it's going to be very interesting to see how they handle the content distribution channel on there. Because even though technically it is a platform designed for writers, I do think that some people that go on there take some interesting liberties in terms of what they publish. Most recently, I've seen poems being published by people, and they get into very specific details about their lives and who they are and what they've been through and stuff like that. And from a digital footprint perspective, that is still something that can be picked up, whether it's via AI scraping or some other means.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, they still hold the keys, even though Substack has been from the beginning a platform that's supposed to support writers. I always have just kind of like a cautious look at it. Ultimately, they hold the keys. They are in control. They are in control of what can happen. And I'm assuming that the bigger that they get, they're going to have to really understand what their bottom line means to them and what it also means to users. So
as a podcaster currently, from what I understand, you publish both audio and video content. And in that article that I referenced to you earlier, I did showcase a startup and a CEO who was able to create a digital avatar using both the likeness and the voice of the user. What is your take on this?
I don't know. I have to think about it. I mean, it seems like a scary world to enter into. I immediately think like, why would someone want to mimic or copy our content and make it whatever they want to manipulate what we have to say? I mean, we do talk about real stuff. Sometimes it worries me, and I'm like, should we keep going? But I feel like right now I'm happy with the content that I'm putting out there, and I think it is helpful for our audience and mothers. And I kind of have to just kind of put that idea to the side.
Yeah, it is a very interesting balance to maintain because a lot of what you're doing as far as discussing motherhood goes is going into personal territory. It's unlike me, where a lot of what I discuss more so centers around the intersection of arts, culture, and tech. So it gives me a bit of a more breathing room for me to discuss things that don't necessarily have to do with me. And even if they do deal with me, it's going to deal with me as a creator, not me as a person. So that's really the clear distinction I think we have as far as differences are concerned. But the one point that we do share in common, I believe, would be we do have this outlook of being people doing things against our will, essentially. Because a lot of what I'm noticing as far as social media is concerned is that it is the place to be at. You know, if you take the craft seriously and you're looking to get to that upper echelon, chances are somewhere along the way you'll have to interface with the online world. It may not be social media necessarily, but there's going to be that at some point in time. And that really gets me concerned about businesses in particular, because those that are not equipped to get into that future of AI everything, if they're not set up to interface with it in a way that gets their businesses seen, then they would be essentially non-existent. It would be as if that it would be almost as if they're erased to a degree. And I think something like that, as far as policy goes, I really think that this is the kind of stuff that more people should publicly advocate for in terms of policy making, because for me, it's really a bottom line of what impacts creators. Because right now, the main problem with these platforms that are currently shifting over to the AI era is that they're building that reputation off of the content that the users create. In other words, user-generated content. That's really what make them that wealthy to begin with. And I think that in such a scenario, it's only fair for said creators to be compensated fairly. And I'm pretty sure that's also why currently the writer strike is going as strong as it is. It's because they're not exactly getting the their money's worth in terms of how much they put in versus how much they put out, especially given the fact that the studios are very much propositioning a deal that would put them at a disadvantage, especially when you compare it to, you know, being a self-publisher versus having to, say, edit work that's been made by an AI for on the behalf of a company, or worse yet, having a company train their AI model off of your work and then getting rid of you as soon as, you know, the job is done. That's where a lot of that model is currently going. And from a privacy angle, I really do think that a lot of people that perhaps would not want their work to be included in that database, they should also have a say in terms of opting out. Since you're a writer on Substack, I'm sure you might be aware, but that work does show up. The obviously Google, it's other search engines, it does show up, but from a structural standpoint, anything and everything that you put out as far as intellectual property is concerned, it's gonna get picked up somewhere in the pipeline. And I was wondering how protective, if at all, you are of that intellectual property, and what you would do in that instance of having your work be taken and be repurposed elsewhere against your will.
You know, the I think I'm in a spot, especially both with my writing and with my podcast, is that I'm still starting out. I'm still small, so I feel like everything is uniquely me, and like I don't think anybody's going to want to take my stuff at this point. As far as later on, I feel like that's something I would be concerned with, but I actually don't even really think about the idea of someone scraping my stuff and using it without my permission. And I think that's the nature of the beast. Because I'm still small, I can kind of confidently walk out there and not have to worry about that.
Yeah, it's not like you had that Joe Rogan status where you have to worry about people literally impersonating you for their ads, which I've seen on TikTok quite a bit. It's essentially they're selling products that Joe Rogan never himself endorsed whatsoever, but the voice that they're using and the video that they're using is actually so convincing that I would not be surprised if someone fell for it. And
for sure,
and I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot to think about from a business standpoint. But I think specifically for the creative writers, it's going to be a very interesting shift for them, because a lot of the websites out there that are catered towards fiction writers specifically, or people that do fan fiction too, that work might end up being picked up by some model that then turns it into a movie or a video game and stuff like that. And I still stand by this idea that they should get the compensation that they deserve, because from my understanding, I'm sure you've heard of 50 Shades of Grey, yeah?
Yeah.
So apparently this property is based off of Twilight. And what happened was the author of Twilight was a fan fiction publisher, and they then turned that concept into something that's just different enough from what it was quote unquote ripping off that people would not really notice. And then it's kind of interesting how both of these properties that are essentially a rip off of each other ended up being billion-dollar franchises.
I know. This also goes down the rat hole of where does an idea start, and how, we consume art and it inspires us. And, the whole copyright issue, I think but that one seems more blatant. I think that is like the ongoing discussion of when is something yours and when is something someone else's. And you got an idea off someone, but, pulling actual full articles and full stuff is obviously obvious, but an idea for a fictional thing, sometimes that can be debated.
So would you say that creativity in the modern age is dead?
I debated this up myself when I was reading a few articles about this. As a creator myself, no. Maybe if I wasn't, maybe I would think that, but I don't know. I just feel like creativity for me, especially, it comes from within, and like it comes out in spurts, and it comes out organically and authentically. Obviously, what I put out there is influenced by the things that I've consumed and the choices I've made of the books I've read and the art that I've seen in museums and the poetry that I read or the stuff that I see on TV. It's like, it's made me who I am, and what I produce out of it is still from me and my own creativity.
Yeah, I see. What about originality? I feel like
originality, yeah. Oh, yeah. I feel like that's also a thing that I also grapple with in writing, where I remember reading this, someone's Substack talking about how when you write, do you ever do your research. Do you go online and see, like, has someone else written about this before? What has other people said about this? Like, is it your true writing form if you just write without having seen anything about it? Or is it really organic if you've taken influence from other things that you've read and wrote about that too? I think that when I write, it depends on what I'm writing. Sometimes I just write and I don't look at anything else, but it depends on the topic. Sometimes, I come from PR where half of my job was doing research and industry research and looking at a competitive landscape. And so it is in me to just do research in Google before I do a lot of the writing that I do. And it's interesting to take other people's perspective and like mull on that and come to a decision of what I think on my own based on, other debates and opinions that I've seen. But as far as originality goes, I feel like it's hard to come by. I'm pretty sure that the stuff that I've written, it's been written about before. It's just the difference is this is my own take.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that originality is hard to come by, because coming from the standpoint of someone paying attention to the intersection of technology and art specifically and how it informs the shift in culture, it really does seem to me that interesting ideas more than ever are popping up. I think the difference is it's the format in which it's being consumed. Because right now, the large majority of people, without a doubt, don't read as much, and that's something something I'm okay with, because I'm actually, surprisingly, that might shock you, but even though I write, I believe that writing as a information channel is quite outdated, because the ratio of information you get versus the amount of time that you put in, it's way too low, at least for me. And the way I do research about things would be that I either go on podcast and I scrub through everything within 30 or so minutes, or if I have the time, I'll sit down and listen to the entire thing, and I'll actually remember it remember it all. And also, a lot of what I end up doing too is I use the voiceover feature on my devices a lot, so that I'm not necessarily reading with my eyes, whereas I'm listening with my ears. So that same concept applies here too, like that's how I'm able to honestly grow that quickly on Substack. It's not so much because I write good stuff, I'm sure I do, but I think the discoverability aspect that Substack requires by default, because of the way it's set up, requires a certain level of interactivity. And for me to interact truthfully with people, I have to be familiar with their work. And what that means is I'll have to use that voiceover feature more often than not. So it's very interesting how, even though I publish written content, I don't consume written content that way, and the way it's quote unquote intended.
What you said brought up a point for me, is that the difference with Substack and Instagram, at least for me, is that, okay, for Instagram, you can create content, put it out there, but you're rewarded with how much you engage, but it doesn't matter the quality of engagement that you do on Instagram. They just want you on the app, liking, commenting, whatever. It doesn't even matter like the quality of what you say on there. And then for Substack, I feel like you get rewarded with the intentionality that you put on there, and the type of engagement that you have on there. It's not, I don't think it's possible to have, like quick likes and quick comments that don't matter. Do you know what I mean? Like it's something that you really have to, and you said it too, it's like you really have to sit there and really engage thoughtfully.
Well, not only that, I really think that part of why I was drawn to Substack specifically was because of the fact that it's just so quiet there. And I mean quiet in terms of the digital quiet, not so much the amount of stuff being said there. Because Lord knows there's plenty being said at any given time. I even have an account set up where it's whole purpose is to follow as many people as possible. And
Mm-hmm.
it's very interesting. I'll occasionally log on it to see what people are currently posting about or reposting. And I joke you not, there's a new article being posted every 30 seconds. I follow that many people. So
Wow.
right, if I was to go on there right now, or by the time we started talking, it likely would have scrubbed through at the very least over 1,000 articles being published by people.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on there, but I still use it though from a strategic standpoint as far as scoping out things I potentially might be interested in. And the way I do that is I'll just scroll all the way down for a little bit, and then I'll hit Control F to then scrub through keywords that I think might stand out.
Right.
Just go from there and just take that over to my actual main Substack and then read that there and interact there if need be. But I don't know. I don't know if it's like a tip or not, but that's also part of the decision that led me there too, in terms of managing my digital footprint and digital hygiene, is the fact that on the email side, there's just so much coming in that I don't like it personally. So I made it a point to only follow things on my Substack email that I actually care about, as opposed to just following whatever and whenever, you know. So
I don't have any of that sent to my email. I just keep it in the app and look at it that way when I feel like it.
see, I don't know how you did that, because I tried to figure that one out and I still couldn't get it to work. Actually, you know what?
Oh, really?
You know what? Scratch that. What happened was there is a way for me to do it, but from what I remember, if I remember correctly, what it asked me to do was to disable all emails. And when I do that, what it does effectively is that for some reason it unsubscribes me from everything I've subscribed to up to that point on that account, so that I don't get new stuff coming up on the app anymore. Or
Oh, really?
so I'm not sure what's wrong with that. So maybe you'll.
I'm gonna look in to see what I did, and I'll send you what I clicked on. But I still get the new stuff on the app.
That's interesting. Yeah, I do not. Well, last time I tried it anyway, I did not. I remember very vividly. At first I didn't notice it, but then it occurred to me, wait a minute, why am I seeing the same post from like a week ago? That's weird.
Yeah, when I had that before, it felt like it was email vomit. I couldn't handle it. So yeah, it's good. I mean, like, basically all of this stuff is mind vomit, digital vomit. It's so much, and I have to be very conscious about how much I consume. I mean, that's the reason why I like reading books, is because it's focusing on one thing rather than the multitasking brain that I have constantly when I'm not reading a book. And I do feel like, I mean, well, going back to your first question, what platforms are you on?
Well, I'm on everything. If you look up my moniker online, it'll show up on just about every platform. And the decision behind that mostly comes down to putting what I'm working on out there and making it as efficient as possible for potential eyes to find me. And from the SEO standpoint, the reasoning behind that also comes from the fact that when I have other platforms I'm active on, it's going to be more likely on the Googling side for me to be recommended if people do look stuff up that may be related to me. So that's the idea there. But the main ones I for sure focus my energy on would be LinkedIn, Substack, obviously, and Reddit. That's the sleeping giant that I think a lot of people are not aware of, in terms of both how to leverage it and also how to properly post stuff on there. Because the thing about Reddit that people seem to forget is that it is part of that early group of the .com bubble era, right? Where websites such as Yahoo or aimed, like you mentioned earlier in the conversation, these, for all intents and purposes, are dead. They're still there, but who goes there for stuff, right? That's kind of my
Right.
point. But Reddit, though, is not like that. Reddit is, although archaic in terms of both its age and its structure, it still ranks really high on the search engine front to to an almost scary degree, actually, because one of the things that made me pay attention to it was me using these AI tools so much. A lot of what I do in my research phase, in my writing, would be that I'll look up something using AI, specifically Bing. They have an AI tool built in to their search engine. So what it effectively allows you to do is to talk with the information that the entire internet has to offer. So I could be searching for some obscure fact about a certain policy or some video game that came out like years ago that perhaps is no longer available, and chances are a Reddit account will show up giving me explicit details about the thing that I'm looking for. And not only that, there's a lot of people in communities on Reddit that are very aggressive about enforcing the curation aspect of what gets posted there. So as a platform, it's less subject to the clutter effect that you're describing. So I think that's the real value I get out of it. And that's why I use it comparatively to, say, to Instagram or even TikTok.
So I've been exploring, I told you, quitting Instagram. So would you say that I should?
Join Reddit? Well, again,
No, I said quit Instagram.
but well, I will say, personally, the problem with Instagram that we've covered ad nauseum at that point is that it is definitely an incentive-based platform where it rewards you for the unhealthy things that you do. That's the worst part.
Mm-hmm.
If you somehow figure out a formula, for lack of a better term, where you're able to balance your posting and your digital footprint / privacy, then like, keep it. I kept mine because my Instagram doesn't really serve as a content distribution channel. It more so serves as a placeholder to signal to people, hey, what I'm doing is legit, and that it points to real stuff I'm doing. And it also serves as an address book so that I can actually keep track of people or things that I've interacted with at some point, so that I can then later reference it either in my article and whatnot. Because as you probably have noticed, I set this whole thing up using Instagram, and the large majority of the sessions I end up having are set up that way. So very few exceptions I would have set up either directly via phone number or here on Twitter. Because Twitter is a whole different beast. But as far as recommendation goes, honestly, I would personally suggest you focus more of your energy on YouTube, because at least there, you can monetize your work in a reasonable amount of time. From what I recall, you only need 1,000 subscribers and about 5,000 watched hours total for you to monetize your content effectively. So I feel like it's a fairly decent trade-off, if you want to call it that. Whereas Instagram, like, you might get the growth, you might get the exposure, but does that translate into monetary gain, or even, I would argue, discoverability? I don't know. Especially for...
No. On Substack, it doesn't. I mean, I have had views, but no subscribers from Substack. I mean, not Substack, from Instagram. But, I also use Instagram for my podcast, which I do believe I have gained listeners from that platform. So,
yeah, especially given the demographic you appeal to, the large majority of them, for sure, on Instagram. So On the writing front, maybe not, but on the podcast front,
Right.
definitely I feel Instagram would be a good call because whenever I go in there, I would see you post about that stuff every so often. I don't I don't necessarily go out of my way to see it, and that lets me know that you're doing something right. That just by me using the platform as little as I do, I still end up encountering your post about what it is you're publishing on a regular basis. That's a good thing. It lets me know that it's working.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean, I'm really trying to. That's the other thing too. Is like, I'd love to just drop the content there and just leave. And I think that that's what I might consider just doing is like, don't even try to engage.
Yeah, well, that's like a whole other beast. But I will say to close that part of that conversation up, the since you mentioned that you have a formal background in the PR world, so do I actually, but more so on the front of creative consulting. And I've been in a lot of variety of industries from the music industry to film to video games and obviously social media in general. That's pretty much my wheelhouse. And it has to be because the large amount of research I do unfortunately leads me down certain rabbit holes where I have to hunt down someone on some obscure Discord server. That's how far I've had to go in the past to find things about what it is what I want to publish. But all of this to say that if that is in your interest to perhaps team up on things on that front to supplement the shortcomings that you may have, I'm very much happy and open to do that with you or for you, whichever works best. Because what I noticed is that on the growth side, a lot of my peers, a lot of what they do well is not so much that they do great content. The great content helps, but they definitely have a solid base network of people that essentially interacts with their stuff on a regular basis or reposts it or talks about it. That's kind of like the idea, right?
Yeah, that's what you want. You want your who cares about like having massive amount of people, but if you have just those few who are true fans and followers, that's what we
Yeah,
want.
because like what it does is that it leads to that critical mass effect where you will reach a certain number of people that are engaged enough so that it lets the algorithm know, oh, okay, cool. So there's a sample size of people that cares about this, therefore I should post more of it. And I actually did the experiment myself. One of the posts I tried to experiment on in Gimmick reached well over 1 million views and 70,000 likes. And I know why it got there. And the thing about that, though, is that if you want to replicate that stuff consistently, you have to tangle in that toxic dance that Instagram or these social platforms want you to. And that's the point. I'm not trying to do that. I'm also interested in having healthy, normal interaction with people and get to know them as opposed to, the digital avatar that represents them. And that will be really it on that part of the conversation. And the last thing I wanted to ask you about specifically caters to, your life as a person today, and how you've mentioned that you come from a time that definitely is different in how things are now. We're told that things are going to change dramatically, not in a few decades, but a few years even. How prepared are you for this? Because we're being told left and right that AI is coming for your job, right? And truck drivers in particular, that's something I'm actually very aware of. That I actually will do a publication on eventually. And yeah, like their job security is very much put into question right now because Tesla, although they've done groundbreaking work in terms of enabling self-driving cars, what that means effectively is that companies, it's only a matter of time before they apply it in the trucking industry. And trucking as an industry is one that serves millions of Americans and families. So how do you see that adaptation curve go for you as things move forward in this space?
It's interesting. With my nephew, he just graduated. And during the graduation ceremony, the principal put out a statistic saying, in the next several years, all of the jobs that are out there haven't even been thought of yet. Um, and I thought that was interesting because that put a lot of hope into the future of like, there's jobs that are there to be had and we don't even know what they are yet. And then there's the other flip side of there's jobs that are going to be taken away because of technology. And I think this is such an unknown territory, even though it's so close. As far as my job as a writer right now, I'm just going to have to believe that like people are going to want to consume content that they believe and know is from a human. And that's all I'm just going to have to bank on. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it depends. If you're asking me from a business perspective, not embracing AI would simply be a death sentence. But from a person perspective, I I'm fairly indifferent because again, I come from that era where I used to not have a phone on me 24/7. I used to
Right.
not
Uh-huh.
watch, TV all day. It was very much a case of just me using it sparsely, and I think that won't change all that much as I grow older. And I also think that a lot of the problems that, for me at least, are becoming obvious, it's more so on the interpersonal front, in terms of, what AI will do in terms of how people communicate with each other. Because right now, um, one of the things I struggle with most famously is that I sound very monotone, and I really don't try and do that on purpose. It's a very me thing, and people hate it or love it. It's kind of like the whole running joke about the podcast I published. Actually, some guy left me a very colorful review about how annoying I sound and how he wants to kill himself. So,
Okay.
so at least, hey, like I'm getting a reaction out of people, that I'm happy
Right.
about that. But I all all of this to say that there's a thing that happens very commonly where people will tell me or assign me this, you sound like a robot kind of thing. And I don't know, like in the era where actual robots can talk, like what is it that's gonna allow me to stand out? Because the way I even write can be very formulaic slash robotic, and some people don't like that. And I know I'm okay with it not being the case and them not liking it. But I feel that on the social communication front, it's only a matter of time before people accuse me of using an AI to speak to them when in fact I'm the one actually speaking. It's it's something I run into a lot, especially via text. People always point attention to the fact that like I have a very rigid way of writing. Because I punctuate, I do all these things, and
Mhm.
that's I think I have Catholic school to blame for that one because I remember, oh yeah, like
Yeah.
I went to Catholic school and they drilled it into me that I needed to punctuate everything, so it just stuck. It's a hard habit for me to get rid of, but yeah, I don't do lols, I don't do the whole emojis. Although if I do, it's mostly sparsely or depending on the context. But yeah, just like for me, I really don't think the threat of a job being taken away, I think it's sort of missing the forest for the trees here because right now a lot of people, as far as finances are concerned, are not exactly in good shape. If I recall correctly, the statistic goes that about 70% of Americans don't have $1,000 saved up in their bank accounts. So forget having a job being threatened. I think there's a more urgent thing that needs to be addressed, and that's the need for people to have a safety net for them to be able to operate under. Because I don't believe that these companies, can afford to just dispose of people. There's only so many people you can just fire or get rid of or not hire, quote unquote, before it does impact the economy in a real tangible way. And when that does happen, it's going to speed up the the bleeding of the current economy and the debt ceiling and all that stuff. But again, that's like a whole other thing that, as someone who's not that well versed in economics, that's like a whole other thing. I try not to get into too much, or at least when I do get into it, I get into it very sparsely and selectively, because American economics, it's kind of like
Is a beast.
yeah, it's like a whole bird's nest. But yeah, I I really appreciate your take on this whole thing though, because like I said, the initial intent was for me to really get your take from things, especially
I enjoyed this conversation.
so did I. Yeah, I think getting a perspective that is not in proximity with the core community that typically knows about this stuff was really helpful and insightful. And yeah, like what I will do once this whole thing wraps up is that I'll publish it at its own separate piece, entirely from the transcript.
Okay.
So yeah, if you have any questions, just like feel free to DM me and stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. And have a good one.
Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.